Maybe 2% is considered, oh, I'm having a good day. Maybe 3 or 4%. It's like, wow, like our Google ads are doing fantastic. On Amazon ads, the average conversion rate for ads is 10%. So the commercial intent behind somebody searching on Amazon is really the magic of Amazon ads. We're 100 episodes in on our podcast, and my first one was I was talking about how it was the golden age of Amazon ads. This was 2 years ago. And I still think we're in the golden age of Amazon, where the clicks are relatively cheap, the conversion rates are relatively strong. Even with the surge of competition on it, it's still what I would consider the best ad platform for direct response marketing.
You're listening to the Ecommerce Influence Podcast with Austin Bronner and Andrew Foxwell. If you want honest, transparent, and tangible results that deliver lasting value and revenue, this is your podcast.
With SMS quickly becoming the most important marketing channel of the decade, many e-commerce brands are excited to get their piece of the pie. But with so many SMS tools popping up, it's hard to know which tool is the best fit for your growing brand. PostScript is a leading SMS marketing platform, laser focused on one thing: building the best SMS platform for e-commerce brands on Shopify. Using PostScript, your team can grow a TCPA compliant subscriber list, use your Shopify data to create targeted text messages, campaigns, and automations, have two-way conversations with customers, and unlock a brand new marketing channel that drives big time ROI for your store. PostScript is trusted by thousands of growing Shopify and Shopify Plus stores to manage their SMS marketing. Stop treating SMS like email and instead respect the inbox, create hyper-segmented campaigns using your data, and make your customers happy. Start your free 30-day trial of PostScript today at ecommerceinfluence.com/PostScript. That's ecommerceinfluence.com/POSTSCRIPT. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the E-commerce Influence Podcast. My name's Austin Bronner, and I'm excited to bring you guys an episode I've been planning for a long time. This episode has been months, maybe years in the making, and so I'm really excited to bring our guest, Mike Facchin, on the show. He is a two-time E-commerce Influence guest. He is one of my best friends here in Austin, Texas, and a very sharp, very thoughtful guy who runs the software company AdBadger. And the episode today, we kind of go all around talking about what it's like to be an entrepreneur, the difference between selling products and selling software, what he's learned about building a team, what he's learned about raising money, and the difference between bootstrapping and having a funded software company that he has been working on for the last couple of years. We talk about accelerators. We talk about how we met. Mike is really one of my favorite people in the world. I'm so happy to have him here and to have the opportunity to share what he's good at with you all. So I'm excited to have him on the show. Let's hop right into it. Welcome, Mike, to the show.
Austin, it's great to be back. Twice on the show. I'm super stoked.
It has been a while. So much has happened since
some events.
so much has happened since your first podcast. Mm-hmm. I can't remember if we talked about this on the first podcast or not, but you and I met in the gym.
Specifically in the sauna.
In the sauna. Well, we met outside and then went into the sauna.
That's right.
Had our first conversation naked in the sauna, talking about free diving. Mm-hmm. And talking about the Dynamite Circle, which was a t-shirt that you had on.
Yep.
And then life took us on this crazy roller coaster ride where we become really good friends. We hang out all the time in Austin, and ultimately have led you back on the podcast in a totally different relationship than we had the first time you hopped on the podcast.
Big time. It's incredibly rich. Anyone listening, you can tell from Austin's podcast, you are so generous and curious and such a great friend to me and the value that you give on this podcast. Like, it's all great, and it's an absolute privilege knowing you. So
thank you. And I feel very similarly to you. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you back on was because you've had I've watched you over the last year and a half, but specifically the last 6 months, work so hard on some of the projects you're working on. Mm-hmm. And it's really been paying off. One of the things we're going to talk about is your launch of Ad Badger 2.0 today, which is really, really exciting. And it's kind of a testament to how long you have been working on this, how hard you've been working on this. I want to dive into this whole thing. You've been a school teacher.
That's right.
You've lived in Korea.
Yep.
You've run an ad agency, Search Scientists.
Correct.
You lived in the Caribbean.
Sure.
Now you run Ad Badger. When you were growing up, did you ever think you were going to be a tech CEO, big tech CEO?
Big tech CEO. You know, I was talking to my friend Jeff Bezos the other day about what it's like to be a big tech CEO. No, when I was young, I was not an academic at all. And in fact, the idea of picking a profession that I was going to do forever was really terrifying. And I think it's interesting now, like at a family gathering, someone asked like my little 6-year-old nephew, like, what you want to be when you grow up? Like, I'm Uncle Mike. Well, you know, the rapidly changing economy, like people really are going to have to move professions a lot. So I'm like that guy now. So I think the thing that I feel like a much better question is like, who do you want to help and how do you want to help people? And like, what kinds of things really excites you? So I would say that ever since I discovered that, I've been doing sort of the same thing, which is I really love teaching. So after I went to college for high school to teach biology, got a science education degree, and I taught high school biology for a few years, and I absolutely loved it. It didn't feel like work. It was incredibly fulfilling. And switching to the next thing, when I decided, hey, I want to run my own organization. I want to start a company where people feel like super valued, and it's an opportunity to teach others too and help them and watch them succeed. That's really been the inception point for starting an ads agency and also starting Ad Badger. So that thread of wanting to help people in a way where I get to teach someone something complicated in a way that simplifies it for them and watch the lights turn on for them, like that is what keeps me going every day. That's why I started a podcast. It's why we make YouTube videos. It's why we publish a lot of content. Like that part, if I can do just that, just podcast, just create content, just help people and like teach them how to do something, I'm very, very happy.
And you do a great job. I think that's one of the things when you are, whether it's on the Ad Badger website or listening to your podcast, you're a great teacher. And I think it comes from you being a school teacher and translating that all the way up. What was the turning point? So, I mean, you built a pretty large, successful paid ads agency. I think there are people listening to this podcast who probably were your clients. What was the turning point that got you inspired to move into software?
So this is a really interesting question. There's lots of different reasons. The first thing that I was thinking was, in general, like we've all heard about this, about the impending AI elimination of all of our jobs, where there'll be automated podcasts interviewing each other, AI bots interviewing each other, where people would then listen to them. Who knows? That's possible. So looking at the degree at which technology was advancing and the tools that I was using for Google Ads and Facebook ads, I was like, wow, like they're able to do a lot of heavy lifting now. Like that's really neat. That's really cool. How come there's nothing over here for Amazon ads that does a lot of the heavy lifting that I wanted to do? And part of the reason was it was so new at the time, because we were doing Google Ads, Facebook ads, and Amazon ads. And Google Ads has had 2 decades to get it right. Facebook ads has also had a lot of time to get it where it is currently. And Amazon ads, even though I was doing it for a couple of years over at Search Scientists, still was very rudimentary. Like they didn't have all the things that Google and Facebook did. And I was just sort of scratching my head one day and decided, hey, like we are potentially going to be replaced by software. Like the amount of information out there to manage your own campaigns, for companies to manage their own campaigns is immensely abundant. Like at one point in time, it was very difficult to really know, how should I be optimizing my bids on Google Ads, or, what option should I pick on Facebook ads? That information has become democratized, and that's great because it's more accessible to everyone. And then you go even further and you're able to actually have some of the heavy lifting be done. There was a time where if you wanted to turn off your ads on the weekend, you'd actually have to go in Friday before you leave work, turn them off, and then turn them back on first thing Monday. And it didn't make sense too because there's time zone issues, so you might be turning it off like 7 p.m. on the Pacific Coast. So there were all these things that you had to do manually, and then slowly but surely, you just start noticing the software be able to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So the question that I asked was, I enjoy this industry. I love the technical challenges that come with solving PPC, pay-per-click riddles. Why not also build a software on it too? So not only do we have the services component covered, but we also potentially are future-proofing our company, the organization, my career. So let's build some software to take advantage of I also think, software is somewhat becoming democratized too. At one point in time, you would need immense sums of money to start a software company. And now you need only a smaller sum of money to start a software company. So I think that will continue to go down.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting because you talked about this years ago with me, and you were like, I'm concerned about the future of running a Facebook ads agency specifically because of the fact that what you said, it's going to be easier. The value of somebody pulling the levers as an ads manager is going to continue to decline. And we've seen it play out over the last 2 years. It's wild. It's, my biggest clients now, the ones that are spending the most, it's just open targeting. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're like, okay, we're going to target women in the US. That's it. And then we'll run ads. And obviously the creative has to be solid and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of work that has to go into doing good advertising, but like the pulling the levers is a little bit different. What's different about Amazon?
Amazon's very interesting because it is so first of all, the ad platform is exploding. Like it went from, under $1 billion a year in ad spend to now I think it's approaching $20 billion a year in ad spend, like incredibly quickly, I think in just a matter of 2 or 3 years. So the rate at which it is exploding is insane. And what's so interesting is that their platform is still so rudimentary compared to Google and Facebook. You can almost see the writing on the wall. At one point in time, when I first started doing Amazon ads, almost a decade ago, they didn't have something as simple as keyword match types, like exact match, phrase match, broad match. And then slowly they added those. And they didn't have, they didn't even have keyword targeting campaigns, and they added those. And then they added the match types. So you can almost, if you know the history of Google ads and Facebook ads, you can almost see Amazon be inspired by these platforms. So that's really interesting when it comes to Amazon ads. It's newer, it's moving fast, it is far more segmented than any other platform. It almost, this is the case. They have different teams working on different ad products, and a lot of times different ad products don't communicate with each other. So it's a very nascent ad platform, and that makes it very exciting. It can also make it very frustrating. And I would say the biggest, most meaningful difference is in terms of returns. A return or maybe a conversion rate of 1% on Google search ads is considered like, hey, that's pretty good. Maybe 2% is considered, oh, I'm having a good day. Maybe 3 or 4%. It's like, wow, like our Google ads are doing fantastic. On Amazon ads, the average conversion rate for ads is 10%. So the commercial intent behind somebody searching on Amazon is really the magic of Amazon ads. And we're 100 episodes in on our podcast. And my first one was I was talking about how it was the golden age of Amazon ads. This was 2 years ago. And I still think we're in the golden age of Amazon, where the clicks are relatively cheap, the conversion rates are relatively strong. Even with the surge of competition on it, it's still what I would consider the best ad platform for direct response marketing. For like, let me run ads and get a return, done.
Sure. It's very interesting. If you were searching on Google, you're not necessarily looking to buy something. If you're searching on Amazon, you're almost surely looking to buy something.
You're a couple steps away.
You're one step down the funnel, right? Like maybe top of the funnel, Google search, and then you're like, okay, I know I kind of have an idea what I want to get. Amazon, although that's changing a little bit. Let's talk about the Ad Badger journey a little bit, because I think, I've had a vantage point of how you've built this thing and kind of the different steps you've gone through. At one point, you spent a few months in Cincinnati at an accelerator. You were grinding, working 10 to 15 hours a day.
Monk mode.
Complete monk mode. And, sending texts, checking in on like what you were learning. What did you take away from your time at that accelerator that's helped you to grow your business?
This was my biggest takeaway. I am a lifelong bootstrapper. I started freelancing, and then I used the funds from that to start an agency and hire people, and then continue to grow the agency that way. And when I started Ad Badger, I didn't raise traditional VC money to start a software company like many people do. So I approached it as this ultimate bootstrapper. Like, how do we get as much done for as little as possible? How do we be as scrappy as possible to outcompete people that do have VC funding? And that level of sort of fine optimization is, I really think, the bootstrapper's song. How do we refine as much as we can? And in my own experience, not only that, but I feel like the bootstrapper's mantra is like, let's go get it done too, in the sense of we're going to use our time and effort and ingenuity to do something to get it done, as opposed to just throwing money at the problem. And by entering the sort of the traditional world of startups and investors and funding, there's a few things that I think bootstrappers can really benefit from. And that is really a meaningful, aggressive growth targets. I often feel like when I talk to a lot of bootstrappers, they're sort of happy with a little growth. It's like, oh, as long as we're moving forward, that's good. And I definitely am one of those people. That's my first reaction a lot of times. When you step into the traditional world of accelerators and startups, it's like, that was the first thing they told us on day one. It's like, you're going to grow 20% month over month while you're here starting now. And it raises the bar a lot. And then they almost work backwards from that. And they say, well, if you were to grow 20% month over month right now, like what kind of resources would you need? Like how much ad spend would you need to be doing? What people do you need on your team? Well, whatever those things are, just go raise money and get that. And then you'll be at 20% growth rate, instead of doing things sequentially, like, okay, I'm going to grow a little bit, then I'm going to hire this person, then I'm going to grow a little more, and then I'm going to hire this other person, grow a little more, do an ad campaign. They really view things doing it simultaneously. So like, let's throw a whole bunch of money at the problem, get all of those things, and then see where we are. Not necessarily see where we are, but it almost feels like that because you're going so fast. Let's see where we are in 3 months and adjust. So that sort of thinking really big, like thinking like, how do we hit a grand slam instead of a single? I think I was really helpful in helping me think bigger when it came to my own entrepreneurial career.
That's really interesting. You've been on both sides, and you've built an agency totally bootstrapped, done other stuff, and embodied the like scrappiness. And I still think that's one of the biggest benefits of your leadership, is the ability to make things happen. Who is it right for?
That's an interesting question. I would say any investor that's going to be involved in an accelerator is going to want to see something flashy, I would say. And when I say flashy, I mean like you're going to raise a lot more in the future and then make your way to TechCrunch or Crunchbase, or you're going to have a big exit in the future, and then they'll get like a fantastic return all at once. The math behind investing is not favored to having a company that spits out 10% profit every month. That's not what a lot of traditional investors are optimized for. So the economics of a person's company really does impact whether or not they should go raise institutional money. Software is really good because it generally sells for high multiples, because of its scale factor, because the thinking there is just like I mentioned, like if we were to throw a whole bunch more money on ads, how many more customers would pop out the other side? How much more revenue would come out the other side? So like that's the sort of the category of companies where going into an accelerator makes sense. I think the model is evolving where there are now accelerators wanting to, grow a little bit and then have you build a profitable company. And then that's how they give back to their investors. So I think the world of investing is continuing to evolve. I think the world of accelerators is continuing to evolve. But I would say anyone who wants to sort of turn the turbojets on their company for a matter of months and have great afterburn afterwards, that really gave us a lot of momentum. I think I found it incredibly fun. I am very much like a workhorse is probably how I would describe my entrepreneurial archetype. So like if you give me uninterrupted days to just go out there and get a whole bunch of work done, I'm off to the races.
You were skeptical though. I remember before you went, you had saying like, I don't know what I'm going to learn from this. Mm-hmm. And then came back with a very positive experience. I think one of the things you shared with me was the power of a single metric. Mm-hmm. And do you guys still do that? Or what are some of the metrics that you look at now?
For us, the biggest things are obviously new users per month. So we've adopted a pretty standard portfolio of monthly retention software metrics. Yep. So we're looking at growth rate, we're looking at churn rate, we're looking at cohorts. So cohort analysis, we released a new feature on November 1st. Now it's January 1st. Like, how are those people from the November cohort doing? Are they converting better than the October cohort because we released that new feature in November? So retention. It's easier to retain a customer and sure. than acquire a new one. So we look a lot at retention. What's cool about software too is you can get a lot of data from a lot of people. So you can you can almost like micro optimize. Good example of this. We're working on a new bid optimization dashboard where people can see inside the bid algorithm what it's doing, and they can sort of get a sense of if there's anything that they could do to make the algorithm better or what the changes have been. And it's really fun to almost get customer metrics associated with what they'd like to see and what they think of the first dashboard. So we actually have someone on the team who dedicates a lot of time towards customer metrics, like affect, like what do they actually think about this particular tool? What's the next direction that they should go in? That's been really, really fun. Because you're dealing on a scale that's larger with more customers, you can get a lot more data than you could if we're working with 30 clients and you can just email them.
Sure, no, it's really interesting, and I think a lot of what you're talking about churn and cohort analysis really parallels too if you have like an e-commerce business with subscription models, right? Because especially as ad costs continue to rise and it's more and more challenging to acquire customers, more expensive. I see a lot of my clients really trying to shift their mindset over to like, well, if our product actually lends itself to some sort of subscription, how can we figure out how to set this up so we're not constantly reacquiring customers today at a high price? I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your like mindset around things, because you've inspired me in many ways to change my mindset around work, around what success looks like, around how long you're going to work. And I think a few years ago, you said, all right, I'm planning, you had a retirement date. I can't remember exactly what.
It's in 11 weeks.
Okay, it's 11 weeks.
I know exactly when it is.
Okay, 11 weeks from today, you're going to be retired. And you talked to me about fat firing, which I'm interested. Tell me about your mindset around retirement and how you came up with an early retirement date and how maybe that has changed or stayed the same in your mind.
So this is really interesting because I remember a couple of years ago when I brought this up, it was, it's a somewhat preposterous. And I also think I didn't have a clear sense of what it looked like. It was more of a feeling. And I think since then, I've really better defined what it looks like. So when I am referring to retiring. It's sort of the retirement of that workhorse archetype. And it was actually part of the reason I had that date in mind. I had that goal for myself. I wanted to go as hard as I could for quite some time. So to me, that's what that represents. It's the retirement from doing things that, quite frankly, don't necessarily benefit the company in a way. Like I will often Superman my way into different tasks. I will want to take on a lot more work than perhaps I should. So it's really the evolution of myself as a leader, establishing myself as someone who can, inspire change at the company without actually being the workhorse pulling it along. So to me, I mentioned it earlier on the show, like if I can come in and just be the educator, if I can just create the podcast and just shoot the video and just sort of brainstorm new ideas for the software, those are things that I wouldn't necessarily want to retire from. So I think it's just a complete shift and change in terms of how I approach work. And that is sort of the evolution of that whole concept for me.
Sure. I think, initially when you shared it with me and some friends, it was almost confronting for everyone else. We're like, okay, we're here working, we're building our businesses. Mike's going to retire in two years.
Yeah.
I remember there being some like pushback a little bit on it. But I think at the same time, it was like, oh, wow, like I can think different about my own work situation as well, right? Because we're all creating our own adventure. And that's one beautiful thing about building your business, right? You can create it whatever way you want. So 11 weeks until retirement. What are you doing now to prepare for retirement?
We are hiring a lot. So we're going to be making some hires over the coming months to take care of some of the things that I'm doing, sales related, take care of some, client management things. So taking care of those things so that I can really come into, who I am. And it's sort of like chapters of my life, right? So my wife and I are planning to have, a kid at some point soon. So want to make more space for that. And I really do think, I think back to almost like the last 10 years of my career freelancing, building the agency, building the software. And that was my archetype. It really was like the workhorse. Like I prided myself on being the first one in the office and the last one to leave in my own office. And at the accelerator, it was even harder because I was with other people who considered themselves workhorses. It was even harder for me to show up first and leave last. So I really do view this as a fundamental shift. And I do have to use this sort of extreme word like retire to sort of signify leaving that behind, like leaving that whole mindset of muscling through and sort of forcing myself to evolve. I think that's, it's as I say that, it's actually quite scary. Will I be able to evolve in the way that I need to in order to, see that through? It's actually quite lofty. It's like it's heavy.
It is. It is. I think it's a really interesting way to think about it. And that's one thing I appreciate about you is your thoughtfulness about how you approach different things in your life with your business, even just the idea, just understanding, having the awareness that you are the workhorse archetype, right. And then trying and understanding that like that serves you in some ways and doesn't serve you in other ways. Sure. And I feel very similar to you because I feel like I've been evolving from that workhorse archetype as well. I mean, we used to go to Atomic Athlete, 5 a.m.
Yes.
Hammer the squats super early.
Yes.
Run by like 6, be done with the workout, and then drink a bunch of coffee, work all day. And there was a benefit to that, but then also a fallout from that where it was like, oh man, I'm getting really tired here.
I can't envision myself doing that when I'm 60 or 50 or 40. So trying to sort of say like, where do you draw the line to not be a workhorse anymore? If you're going to pick any arbitrary number to draw it, why not at a particular date that's close by and achievable? So, and it's so funny too. Until then, I'm going to be like super workhorse. It's like, okay, one last hurrah, here I go, and just grind it out. So I think it's really the change in my whole. It's almost like a metamorphosis in a lot of ways, to sort of view the way that I've been operating, to have that be pretty much my most used tool in the tool belt. Okay, what are we going to do? Well, I'm just going to muscle through. I'm just like going to get it done. I'm going to envision myself. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to watch a motivational YouTube video of somebody like running up a mountain in the snow, and that's going to fire me up, and I'm going to go get it done. And I think that's great. I think at the same time, I don't think I can do that forever. And perhaps, people can, but it's something that I know that there's more that I want that doesn't involve that. And, one thing for me, I think it's really interesting, like detangling your identity from entrepreneurship is like actively doing other things. And, in the last sort of 6 months, I've been really interested in volunteering more. And like, that's been incredibly fulfilling too. So I think it's really interesting to sort of go through the chapters of your life and ask yourself, what have I been doing? And how long could I do this for? And what does the next chapter hold? So these are a lot of the questions that I ask as I sort of turn 35 next year.
They're all really good questions to ask, and it's interesting because I find that it's not an either or. Sometimes it's like when you get more alignment, at least from my own experience, when I get more alignment, things start to move faster in ways I didn't expect. And even I've felt that fairly recently with just using like the workhorse archetype, like trying to shift away from that and focus on other things has actually led to faster growth, which is counterintuitive. I think it's also interesting because when you think about how motivations change around building businesses, I think that's one of the more interesting things to talk about. When you first got into the entrepreneurship game and starting to build online businesses, what was your motivation and how has it changed?
This is really, to go back in the very beginning, all I wanted to do was freelance, maybe get one client and go live on the beach in Thailand. That was it. That was literally the reason I started. I went to Google and I typed in how to make money online, and I went through all the seediness of the how to make money online internet.
Warrior Forum?
No doubt, I was there trying to learn how to do it. And ultimately ended up happening was I realized what's cool about it is you realize more about yourself along the journey. And I realized that, wait a second, it actually isn't fulfilling to just go to the internet and turn it into your ATM, as it's been referred to. You just go and you do something and money spits out. Cool, great, but how long can you do that until you sort of feel like you're literally at the ATM and turning it into a transaction? So there's been so much fulfillment in thinking of ways to help people and problems to solve for people and ways to engage with people that is fun and meaningful. So when I first started, it was really selfish. It was I want this. I'm going to go do this and go get that. And, I think it has evolved in so many ways. Some of the most rewarding parts of what I do is talking with the team and trying to help the team grow both professionally and personally. Those moments are amazing. Hearing, starting a podcast and hearing from people saying that the podcast is helpful, those are professional highlights. Those are personal highlights as well. To know that, the work that you're doing has some impact for the outside world, I think is really, really delightful. So I think for me now, my biggest motivation is how do we just extend that out to even more people? How do we, go out there and really build a super quality product for that people love? Those things are really exciting to me.
Yeah, it's so interesting how many people are brought into the world of online business through the same kind of desire or channel, and then that evolves, or at least the ones who stick around, right? Both you and I have been doing this you've been doing it for a decade, maybe, something like that.
Almost.
And if you're in it for a long enough period of time and you're good enough to do it, that you can make a living for yourself and then, make a very good lifestyle for yourself, I feel like that motivation at a certain point will shift because it just gets boring, right? It gets the idea of, like you said, turning the internet into your personal ATM is not very fulfilling. Whereas building something that helps people is fulfilling. And that's where the internal motivation, or like that motivation is much more rich.
I heard the Dalai Lama say one time that it's okay to be selfish, to enjoy helping people so much that it like gives you joy. He's like, that's one thing you can do that's selfish. That's going to be okay.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, it's very interesting. When you look at what you're doing with Ad Badger, what's been the hardest part about building it?
Anytime anyone's like, oh, maybe I should start my own like software app, I'm always like, my friend, let's get on a call and talk about that. The most challenging part of software, I thought I was really good at staying organized, project management, motivating, keeping team members motivated, all of these different aspects of running a project, like running a company. I was like, got all these dialed in. Software is its own beast. If you have an inefficiency in how a project is managed, that is multiplied by 1,000 when it comes to software. In a lot of ways, software is and can be like building a physical product where you need to spec it all out, you need to send it off, and then it comes back. And the management of that is incredibly nuanced and incredibly complex. It's so fascinating if you can ever sit with a developer and you tell them an idea and you watch the gears in their head start turning. It's so fascinating because so many things pop up. Maybe you want to create a search box where people can search through their keywords. Well, what happens if somebody puts a 0 in there instead? Like they accidentally type a 0. What actually happens then? You need to provision for all these contingencies. So I think the hardest part of software development is definitely the time that it takes, the project management that's involved. I learned agile development, Scrum, all of those things, immensely helpful. And I went into it not knowing that. I thought it was, I wanted to do this. So I'll explain to the developers how bid optimization works. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll have a bid optimization tool. And then you start to work with that. And it's like, well, actually, like, can we get this column in there? And actually, like the color over here doesn't look exactly the way that I had it in my head or the way that it was designed or something like that. And it's this huge stream of trying to get the vision in your head to others. And if there was some kind of matrix download that I could give, it would be that. So it's this constant stream of trying to envision what you think it should do, getting it to the developers, having it be built, getting feedback, Amazon changing things. Software is very much a moving target, especially in the digital marketing space. So trying to constantly organize it, trying to decide what not to build. Hey, Amazon made this change. Should we incorporate it or not? Well, I don't know. How much time will it take? How much effort will it take? How much will it cost us to make? Like, how many people will it actually serve? So deciding what not to do.
So we need the Neuralink. You could Neuralink to Bezos.
Yes.
And then Neuralink to your developers. And then all these problems will be solved. I like the framing of it being the stuff that you need to do for other businesses, but just compounded down, right? Because communication, what you're talking about is ultimately like communicating your ideas in a way that are clearly for somebody else, clear enough for somebody else to take and execute on.
I mean, we have 100 episodes of our podcast. Every single one of them talks about Amazon PPC. It's like, how do you get all of the facets of nuance in the world of Amazon marketing into a single tool? There's so many contingencies to think of. Somebody with one product, somebody with 10, somebody with 10,000, somebody who sells a product for $20, $200, someone who's incredibly seasonal, someone who's not. There's so many contingencies to account for when you're building a tool. It's a fun challenge.
I think everybody can take from that and work on their own communication to make it more clear, because the more clear your thoughts are and the more you can outline them in a way for other people to be able to execute on them, the more powerful your business can be, and how much fast. It's interesting how simple a lot of the businesses get. Maybe not the tool specifically, but as they continue to grow, I just keep coming back to it. It seems like the larger the business is, often it's like the more simple the business model.
I really do believe, and like here's the fix to all that consternation I was just talking about. The fix of it is to stop thinking about what you think the tool should be, like where's your vision for the tool, and you really just need to flip that. And what we've started doing a lot with our second version, and I actually think that's part of the issue that I had with version 1. Like I kept saying like, I want it to do this, I want it to do that. And we eventually shifted to what is the user story behind this? Like instead of saying like, okay, this is the way that like I would operate the Amazon campaign myself, so I'm going to need a tool that does this. Instead, really shifting it towards, okay, well, most users want to do this. Like most users want to see a dashboard that says this. Users want this. So like thinking of it from the user's perspective and almost getting rid of a lot of your own like boundaries for what the tool should be really simplifies it, because all of a sudden you're not building it from this list of 1,000 optimization strategies. You're building it from a list of, who is our customer and who are we optimizing for? And I think that's probably where you've noticed that simplification of tools over time. Our tool today, we're trying desperately to make it more simple. And I think that's really cool to sort of look at your tool and be like, well, this is so powerful. Let's just simplify it and make it even easier to use. And that's sort of the chapter that we're in for this particular tool.
And you mentioned Scrum. Do you guys use Scrum, the Scrum methodology and you talk about user stories, so I kind of figure like they're probably combined here. What is the Scrum methodology for people who don't know what it is? And how do you guys use it? Because I think it's powerful not just in software, but also we use it as well.
Yeah, it's very true. The EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System, the Traction book, it's very Scrummy. It's very Scrum inspired. So to me, it's my definition of it is you're basically writing what you want done and then checking in every day to be sure it gets done. And the way that we've used it is essentially just that. So for us, we start with, what do users want? How do we turn that into a tangible piece that a developer can work on? How do we outline that piece in such a way so that it's so defined that the developers can really, work on it and not have it be returned where you say like, oh, can this be different or that be different? So you need to write those instructions really clearly, and you'd want to write them from the perspective of the customer, not yourself. Developer works on it, checking in every day during a daily stand-up. Eventually, towards the end, there's some kind of presentation at the end of a sprint, and then you essentially rinse and repeat. What I also think is really interesting about sort of agile development and the Scrum methodology is at the end of every sprint, there is a retrospective where you're going back and you're looking like, what could we have done to make this even more effective? Were there any communication breakdowns? Like, did we get enough work done? Should we have done did we assign too much and quality had to sacrifice as a result? So that retrospective that's built into the Scrum methodology, I think is, it's actually curious to think that once every 2 weeks you're analyzing the way that you work. But with software and the way that things change and advance so quickly, it actually is really, it's some of the most fun to just look back and, how did this sprint go and like how can we make the next one even better?
I totally agree. I mean, we use the exact same methodology where we're planning generally 2, sometimes 3-week sprints, and then we will go through the retrospective process. And like, the way I define it, or the benefit that I see is that we're always shipping something every 2 weeks, right? We're always moving something forward rather than working on a project for 6 to 8 weeks or longer and then launching everything at the same time. It's like, what can we do to improve and what can we get done and launch in 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's also helpful for me as an entrepreneur with that workhorse mentality where like everything needs to be done now. And it almost creates this hectic anxiety. Like I'm giving my anxieties to everyone on the team. Instead, it's like, hey, this is going to take 2 weeks. And it's actually way more important to have a steady pace of every 2 weeks you're shipping something meaningful as opposed to like well, we panicked and got this done in a day, and now people are fried. And like the next thing that would have taken another day is actually going to take 3 days because we're so fried on the first thing.
I totally agree. And you're in the communication that you can have as well, when you have to be mindful and you say, we're going to start this sprint, we're going to communicate everything at once, and we're going to do it very clearly so that people can work on it for 2 weeks, versus every day having to communicate a new project, which is super exhausting. If you're in that position where you're like the one coming up with a lot of the ideas, that's exhausting. And then it's like feedback back and forth on Slack. End of the day, you're like, what did I do?
Yes. I'm actually trying to get everyone at the company to use Slack less these days and have more conversations happen inside project management tools. So we use Jira and we use Asana, trying to push for more conversation in there as opposed to sending a message on Slack. And when you send a message, it's almost implied in, like, we've tried to say the rule, like no one's expected to reply to a Slack message like right away. Like we know people are doing other things. You're on a call doing this, but there's still that red dot that's going to pop up even if you're on a call. There's still that red dot that you're going to see as soon as you open up your computer. And it's so difficult to not reply to that right away, as opposed to checking your Asana periodically and then replying it there and having, slower, better conversations as opposed to answer this right now. So I'm actually rounding a corner on the importance of Slack.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
I deleted it off my phone.
Yeah,
big win.
Huge, because I turned off all notifications because that is so, at least for what I need to be doing, which is like creating content and doing coaching for working with clients, getting out of that like flow is really, really hard. And I feel like that with everybody, if you've got every one of your employees is going to have tasks that require deep focus, even if it's just for half the day. So that can be really challenging. I want to go back to you're 11 weeks from retirement. What would you go back and say to yourself when you just started Search Scientist, right? Because you kind of rounded a corner, freelancer to agency.
If I can go back and talk to myself, I would really want my younger self to know, like, it's going to be okay. I think a lot of people approach entrepreneurship from different angles. And, one thing, I believe I've turned into a superpower, is really being a very anxious entrepreneur, like always trying to think of contingencies of like why something won't work out, and then doing a lot of work to try to prepare for all those contingencies, and doing a lot of extra work to prepare for like 3 different things when in actuality, like none of them would happen. And I think looking back at my own entrepreneurial career, I'd really want to, let that, 25-year-old know that there are principles that could guide you away from that sort of anxious, worried mindset. And it really comes down to trusting people more. We just hired someone to do some work for us over at Ad Badger, some marketing work. And it's marketing work that I feel like I could do. I feel like I know. And it's so nice to sort of hire someone and give them the space to do their best work, as opposed to, really zooming in and potentially micromanaging and being worried and stressed about it and checking in. And I think there's immense value in almost going slower. There's immense value in going more intentional. And that's a lesson that took me a while to learn.
Super valuable. It's one that, it takes a long, long time to learn. And I feel like I'm trying to learn that every single day. One question I want to ask you is, what are some of the best like resources that you can think of that have helped you on your entrepreneurial journey?
I think everyone should have a mastermind and it doesn't need to be a professional one. It doesn't need to be one that people pay to join. It can literally be people that you find and you ask them, hey, do you want to meet once a week, once every 2 weeks, and just share a win and share a challenge? Those are some of my favorite moments as an entrepreneur, like showing up, being excited to share, being excited to learn, being excited to push others and be pushed yourself. I think every entrepreneur needs some kind of mastermind. Maybe not all the time. You can take breaks. I think going in and finding peers that are interested in doing the same thing you are and collaborating with them is probably one of the period most valuable things anyone can do.
What's been the best structure for a mastermind that you've been in? What was the, like, how did it work, the one that was most effective?
I was in a PPC mastermind with the same crew on and off for about 5 years. And I consider them some of my favorite people and favorite entrepreneurial peers. And the structure that we had was really simple. It was sort of, what's up for you right now? Like, does anyone have anything that's like very important that they should share? We'd often open up with that. And then after that, it was really the what's a win and what's a challenge that you've experienced. And the win is great because you get to learn what is working for someone else and think about how it could potentially work for you. Sharing a challenge is great too, because you get to hear, how everyone else's insight on that. And that was really the format that worked well, and it's really, really simple.
Super simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there is some benefit in just keeping it simple in a way that it makes it easy for people to show up, right? And just also, like, I think the thing that I've found valuable is committing to saying you're going to do something before the next meeting so that you do it, right? Like, we're all human and procrastinate. Awesome, man. Well, this has been really, really, really good. I want to wrap it up. Be respectful of your time here. We could probably hang out and chat for a while. What is something that someone listening can kind of take away from this episode that they could implement right away?
I think one thing I'd love to, because we sort of touched on this a bit in this particular show. I read a book in the last year, which I thought really, for an entrepreneur, I think it really helped me understand my own entrepreneurial tendencies. And the book was Reboot by Jerry Colonna. And I think what's so interesting about this book, it really has you look at yourself as an entrepreneur through the lens of almost like your younger self. Like, why are you doing what it is that you're doing? Who are you trying to prove something to? How do you respond to stress? Do you give pieces of that to your team? Are you using your team as a magnifying glass to magnify the best or worst parts of yourself? And I think that fundamentally changed my leadership style, recognizing that. And I think it definitely made my team much happier to not have so many of my own idiosyncrasies show up as a leader. So I think the one thing would be to check out that book. It's probably my favorite entrepreneurship book that I've probably read in the last few years.
How did your leadership change?
We've sort of alluded to it, like with that slower pace. The slower pace, there's no need to worry. Like, I can trust someone to do something. I don't need to swoop in and double check. And this is true even with, the leadership team at the company, just continuing to swoop in and sort of just realizing, trust people more. Like, give them the opportunity to do their best work. And, they'll never strengthen their own legs if you're trying to carry them along the entire time. So for me, it really showed up in that way, and realizing that, other people on the team are dealing with all kinds of other things too. So giving them the space and the opportunity to sort of be themselves and do their best work, that's been really valuable to me.
That's awesome. I'm going to check it out. If someone's listening, and obviously we talked about Amazon ads, who is the right fit for Ad Badger and who's not?
I can talk a lot about this topic because, we've talked about how information on how to optimize a campaign is becoming more democratized, where you can access how to do almost anything. I think the challenging part with that is putting it all together. So if you can think of a Amazon advertising campaign as a real entity, you can think of it like needing a personal trainer. So this can be someone who's managing their own campaigns. Maybe they're a solopreneur or they're a small team, and they're managing their own campaigns and they want to push it forward. Or maybe they're a professional marketer and they're looking for a tool to be able to get more work done faster. So it's really those two groups. Anyone who's thinking about their Amazon advertising, wants to save time, wants to save money, and wants to make more of it on Amazon, those are the things that AdBadger helps people accomplish. So in terms of, I invite people to come out and check out our podcast to learn more, a little bit more about.
It's a great resource. If you spend money on Amazon, you're not going to find a more like dialed in niched podcast for what you're doing.
Yeah, we really try to raise the bar for every single episode. Every time we sit down to create an episode, we say we want people to be able to turn off the show, immediately go to their keyboard and do something in their campaigns that they haven't done before. And that's a pretty high bar to hit for each episode, but it's so fun. Back to that like teacher mentality, like how can we simplify something that they haven't done or thought of before? So those are the components that really is exciting to me. So if you've got Amazon ads, we've probably got answers for you.
Yes, I do not doubt that. What about size, ad spend wise? Is there any like tiers that people need to think about?
So we've got our do-it-yourself platform where we have people who can just come sign up for the software, and the software is appropriate for, we've got a small plan for $50 a month. We've got a more expensive plan. And in terms of the software, it can help somebody who's spending, $1,000 a month save time, money, probably 10% of their budget, get back and have AdBadger pay for itself every month. And then we've got mega spenders on our software that are using it for negative keyword management only because they don't want to sift through their search terms anymore. So the cool thing about software is we really try to turn it into something that does the heavy lifting. So there's common things that an account of any size needs to take care of, and we do those things. So it's bid optimization and search term management and keyword graduation, and that has value for somebody just getting started or somebody who's spending $250,000 a month on their ads.
So adbadger.com, check it out. PPC Dan, it's got a great intro. Fantastic intro.
We just had, no joke, people can go listen to it, episode 101, David Attenborough narrated the intro.
I'm not joking. The intro is fire. And if somebody's interested in connecting with you, what's your most accessible way?
I'm big on LinkedIn. I know you hang out on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn a lot.
Yeah. Do you post motivational stuff?
I will post one motivational thing on Motivation Monday.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right. We'll put links in the show notes to your LinkedIn. Thank you. It's been awesome. Really appreciate it. Always good to hang out and talk. And we'll have to do another episode, but this next time we'll not wait 2 years. This is long overdue.
Long overdue, my friend.
Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
Later.
Hey guys, it's Austin. And if you've been loving the podcast, you got to go check out brandgrowthexperts.com. That's where I work one-on-one with my clients to help them build faster growing, more profitable online stores. I've got coaching programs and workshops that we host all over the world. Would love to have you come check it out. If you're a fast growing e-commerce business or you want to be a fast growing e-commerce business, you got to check it out. That's the spot for you. We go more in depth than we do in the podcast with comprehensive trainings and coaching to help you scale up. Check it out, brandgrowthexperts.com. See you there.